Hi, this is Tyler Cassidy for Extending Children's Mathematics, Fractions and Decimals, Chapters 7 and 8, and a little summary of the book. Let's start with Chapter 7, and that's with Understanding Decimals. Basically, they started off with, they want to relate understanding decimals back to our base 10 number concepts, where 10 equals 10 to the first power, around 100 equals 10 to the second power. But consequently, that means that 0.1 equals 10 to the negative first power. 0.01 equals 10 to the negative second power. 0.001 would equal 10 to the negative third power. Things of that nature. What I thought was most important in these first few pages talking about base 10 is the problem that comes up a lot on page 154, and then it comes up later at the end of the chapter where it's, for example, an animal at the zoo eats blank pounds of food each day. How many days will it take the animal to eat blank pounds of food? And you have to come up with solutions. The teacher talks a lot about how they split them into groups because Group A shows, they're pretty much lost. Group A would be the students that are struggling pretty hard with that. Group B would understand parts of it and then put it into fractions, not really being able to put it together. Where Group C and D are going to both use relational thinking. The only difference is Group D is going to be a little further along. So it talks a lot about how this teacher divided them into groups and how they thought that they could instructionally teach them to understand concepts, because we're all at different stages with our fractions and things of that nature, because we don't all have the same background knowledge going into it. They talk about open number sentences for developing decimals, for basically a times 10 plus b equals 87, and then find as many solutions as you can that'll make that true, because there's hundreds. And the cool thing is it encourages the students to you can use decimals to multiply it to make it make the answer true, or you could use negative numbers. It's just, if you have them do as many as they can, you could have a broad range and they could really surprise you. It talks a lot about, not a lot about, but it talks about decimal notation where 5/10 is going to go to 0.5, or in that scenario, how a fraction to a decimal is a decimal. It's just written a different way. And I think that's really important because, still I'll see sometimes where I'll say 67% or 2/3, and I sometimes even see adults go, how did you get to 2/3 from 67%? I mean, I think that's important for them to figure out but a lot of what they're doing with decimal notation here is just with a tenth, like 54 and 1/10 would be 54.1. In that way, it talked a lot about how, not a lot about, it talked about how they want students to not be saying 84.89. They want students to be saying 84 and 89 hundredths, because that shows an understanding that they're not just reading it, that they actually understand what they're reading and what it means. Lining up the decimal point so you can add up things better made it a lot easier for students to understand decimals. In chapter 8, we start to get to operations. It's called Understanding Operations of Fractions and Decimals, and adding fractions, which a lot of students will have a hard time with. Like, we took a test the other day in 5th grade, which was a pre-test, so they had no prior knowledge coming into it about it. It was like 3/6 plus 4/9, and the kids just added straight across because that's what they've been taught to do. So they would get 3/6 plus 4/9 would equal 7 and 7/15, and you would look at it and you wouldn't quite understand. You would understand how they got it, but you need to understand and teach them that they need to get to similar denominators, and it makes it a lot easier to add, and then you add it and then you make it into simplest terms. That's when knowing your fact practice is really important, so you can find similar denominators without having to just sit there and go, okay, 4 plus 4, 8. Okay. You need to just know what each problem is and equal to in that case. It talks about how subtracting decimals is a lot easier when you figure out that you can make the other number a decimal. So 4 minus 1.5 would be, it obviously is 2.5, because you can cut into the other number and make it a decimal. Chapter 8 was mainly about multiplication and addition of fractions too. And what I found really interesting was there are strategies for like 3/4 times 12. Well, first I'm going to figure out what is 3/4 of 12, because so you divide 12 into 4 different parts. So you can draw 4 circles and put 1, 2, 3, 4, and go right across and make 12. Well, now I know the answer, and I'll take 3 of these and I'll leave 1 out. And how to get things like that, different strategies that the students used to do that. And basically, a summary of the book is it was a great. I actually found this really interesting, this book, because it basically said that there's not one way to do all these types of math problems. There's not one specific way in which students are going to learn best. That you have to see what they're doing and adapt on the fly. It really made a huge impact on, and it told you every single way that like a student is going to learn. Like, you're going to have some students that are going to have no knowledge of something and how to address that situation. You're going to have some students who have a lot of background information. Well, what are you going to do with them to challenge them later? So I really enjoyed this book, and I would actually recommend it if anybody is nervous about teaching math. Some of the concepts can be a little bit difficult if you don't have a big math background like me. I mean, I don't have a big math background, that's what I mean. But I found it interesting, helpful, and I've already been able to implement some of these strategies when I am substituting in math. So that's about all I got for you. That's Extending Children's Mathematics, Fractions and Decimals. Good night.